Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Here today. I'm very excited about it. I have no idea what he's going to talk to you about. I just finished his book on the plane last night. Oh, almost finished it. I got to the point where he talks about Microsoft. So you should at least get to page 240 something, because it's a fascinating sort of précis on Microsoft's place and a lot of things that are going on in the world today. I'm so pleased that you could be with us, Bruce. I'm going to let him talk to you about whatever he wants to talk about. So please help me welcome Bruce Sterling.
Yeah, hi. Well, it's nice to be back with you weird, cranky characters once again. Yeah, you know, this book has got a lot to say to people in your industry. It got blurbed. I almost said it got blogged. But it got blurbed by Howard Schmidt, your former chief security officer. And Bill Gates is a minor character in the book. At one point, he offers my hero a job. And you know, it's a book about computer security, among other things. It's basically about it's a Mr. Smith Goes to Washington story about a techie who decides to join federal service after 9/11 because his family has a long history of technical service to the United States government, and complications ensue. And it's got a villain and a super weapon. It's a techno thriller. Techno thrillers kind of require villains and super weapons because otherwise there's no reason to keep turning pages. But although it's a great super weapon, and I like stole it from the best guys in the business, and really like put some intellectual effort into it, and I thought it was a nifty, keen kind of weapon-o mass destruction style, nifty techno thriller super weapon. Absolutely nobody's interested in it. Nobody's patting me on the head about my ingenious super weapon or the labor of love I invested in this, because nobody believes in WMD anymore, frankly. It's just a sci-fi vaporware notion. What people are interested in is the book's take on federal computer security, and it's a mess. I don't think anybody who's got email has got to know that federal computer security is a mess, but I never expected in my life to see it as bad as it is now. It's just a debacle. And it didn't help that the capo of cybersecurity for the Bush administration was Richard Clark. But he was. And the guy blew up like thermite right in front of the Congress and every camera in the business, and it's just it's a crying shame. So I have some rather harsh things to say about the state of law and order in cyberspace in this book. And people ask me about it, is it really this bad? And the answer is, yeah, it's pretty much this bad. I mean, my story here is a parable. It's sort of the exaggerated kind of anime cartoon version. But it's all about real issues that people are facing, online and on the net every day. And, I could go on and on about it. In fact, I am going on and on about it because I've got to, like, go to Gartner, and they're doing, like, one of their gigs, consultancy gigs in Washington. And I'm supposed to go down there and talk to all these feds about how screwed up it is and kind of get this off my chest in, kind of hammer and tong style version. And it's an unpleasant task, but they already paid me, so I'm going to have to go. And maybe I'll learn something. I mean, I commonly do when I go to Washington. I just went to Washington. This is the last day. Today is the last day of a very extensive book tour to support this book. And like guys are like sidling up to me at these signings. It's like, yeah, it's worse than they say. I've read it, and you're right. It's terrible. So, what agency are you from? I'm from under the hill. You mean to say you're from the NSA, sir? You mean like you're from under Fort Meade? He just sort of sidles away, He just like leaves diagonally. Well, be that as it may. I want to try and get a little closer to the fire here, because I don't want to, like, spend my entire time pontificating about public affairs, because I have to do that in Wired every month. I want to, like, try and get a little more hands-on with this subject, and I've tried to do this with a few audiences on my way here, but you guys are like the absolute target demographic for this personal crisis I'm facing. And, you email me, send me email, bruce@heGÇÖll.com. I'm actively soliciting ingenious responses to this really sort of personal crisis that I'm facing. So now I'm going to, like, background the problem for you here, okay? Now in Austin, which is where I live, we have this social event every year, which is called South by Southwest. And South by Southwest sort of has three wings. It's a cultural conference. It's a festival, I guess you would call it. There's South by Southwest music, where, like, garage bands show up from all over America and all over the planet, really, looking for, like, an A&R guy and a record deal. So, and you, like, get a wristband and you kind of, like, wander around on a drunken haze down 6th Street, listening to bands. And then there's South by Southwest film, which is kind of the common thing in Austin lately, because we got, like, real film directors in town, like Richard Linklater lives in Austin, and he's, like, making a film adaptation of Philip K. Dick's Scanner Darkly, and Richard Rodriguez spends a lot of time in Austin. He's like Mr. Spy Kids, and he's doing all this stuff. And Sandra Bullock lives there, and Quentin Tarantino shows up with his posse, and it's a very odd thing. It's like having your town infested with Sumatran fungus. There really didn't used to be any movie people in Austin, but now there's like a little movie scene in my hometown, and it's kind of adorable and fun to watch. And then there's the third part, which is my people here, which would be South by Southwest Interactive, which is the geek set in my town, right? It used to be South by South Multimedia, and it's not like an industry gig. These people are like cyberculturati. These are like weblog guys and kind of meetup guys and kind of vaguely political online organization characters and Electronic Frontier Foundation fellow travelers and epic guys and computer game designers and, SIG-Graph habitués and washed-up former virtual reality, visionaries and dazed, sort of half-conscious, Linux programmer, loony, free software characters and science fiction writers. So, I've gone to this thing every year since they started it because I knew the organizers, and these are just people out of my milieu. And so every year I have like a party during South by Southwest, and it's my open house party. And it's a very sort of information wants to be free kind of party. I just go there, and I'm always booked to do something. I'm on a panel, or I give a speech or something, and traditionally I end my speech by just inviting the whole audience over to my house for free beer. They're like, "Come on, boys, we're all going over to my house for free beer," and and they show up. It's not difficult to give away free beer. I mean, I don't know why people think that this is expensive. I mean, if you just price it out, a keg of beer, you can get somebody really drunk for like 75 cents for a keg of beer. So, and plus people bring their own beer. I mean, they bring lots of liquor. And my organizational principle for this party, which has been going on for just donkey's years now, is that you can bring anything you can carry and anybody you trust, right? And strangers show up, and that's kind of the point, It's not like I hand out little laminated cards and say, "Oh, you have to go by the novelist's house." It's just like we literally throw the doors open, and people just show up. And, and there's never been an incident. People have a really good time. You can't predict who's going to be there. I really enjoy talking to people who don't know I'm the host. It's like, "God, this guy's tasting art. What's with this?" I like to attend my own party. I mean, that's kind of the thrill for me. And it's just a little social thing that I do, and it's fun, and it's sort of our big social outreach. My wife and I, this is what we do to kind of pitch in and give back a little bit, and it's pleasant, and it costs us a few $100, but it's not like a budget breaker. It's not the cost that's any kind of trouble. I mean, you can do it. You can make like 200 or 300 people really happy for like the cost of, I don't know, a laser printer or something. Why not? Right? I mean, there's not a big problem. Well, this year I did have a big problem. This year I had a problem because there were 200 people in my audience, and I'm like, okay, everybody's going over to my house for beer, and they're like, yay! 600 people showed up at my party, and they weren't the people in the audience. I mean, half the people in the audience usually attend because it's on the last day, and a lot of people leave anyway, but they showed up, and some kind of flash mob thing occurred, right? I mean, there was some kind of electronically assisted gathering happening at my house because people were showing up, and they were showing up in like buddy lists. It wasn't just the usual foot traffic of 1 and 2 people. There would be, like 1:30, there were like sudden clusters, like armadas of taxis coming in from 2 or 3 directions, and people would get out of the taxis. They're like name-checking each other and sort of clustering together and then coming into the party in a mass. And guys are like phone camming the party. It's like, he's not kidding. Look, there's a keg here, Kasnicka. Z, 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 and off they come. And, and like actresses are showing up, which was sort of interesting because there was never much crossover into the film thing. But like guys are coming in like, Bruce, your party's full of hot chicks. It's like, yeah, and there's like girls in like lingerie tops with stiletto heels, and and they're like they're not actually partying, they're not eating, they're there to display themselves, and so they kind of swan anorexically to this crowd of eunuchs, sysadmins, and they're like, they're awestruck. But, somebody had told them that it was sort of necessary to go make the scene at the novelist's house, and they sort of arrived in a block, united by phones, I assume, and then departed. So it was lively, and they were very well behaved group. No, there was no trouble. They were very sweet, kindly people, except more and more of them started showing up. So around 1:45, the cops show up. And they're like, well, and I'm like in there pontificating, as is my wont, and, and somebody's like, gee, Bruce, the police are out on the porch. I think you better come see. So I go out there, and there's like one cop, and he's an Austin cop. He's a very nice guy, but he like wants to see some ID. So I'm handing this over, and he's like, so, Mr. Sterling, is this your home? Yes, officer. Well, Mr. Sterling, we're receiving noise complaints from your neighbors, and let me just tell you the drill here. I'm giving you a verbal warning here, and if I have to return second, I'm going to have to write you up a citation, and if I have to return a third time, I'm going to have to take you downtown. Well, I'm like talking to this guy, and I'm like, well, that's very interesting, officer, but what if you take me downtown and people continue to arrive at the party? Because they're not like being issued invitations, they're just sort of arriving spontaneously. What are you going to tell these 600 people when there's no host and you've arrested him? And he didn't like that question. And I didn't like the question either. Because, it was kind of loud. I mean, gee, officer, I told him, we're not playing loud music. It's a very well-behaved crowd. This is South by Southwest. I mean, this is... Well, it was 1:30, and he said, you're not playing music, but you're talking. And people can hear you talking 2 blocks away, and they could hear us talking 2 blocks away. There was uproar. I mean, these people had a lot on their minds. They were talking about, politics and current affairs, and, they weren't talking about business because there isn't any in their line of work, but, they had a lot to confess to one another. They were crying on each other's shoulders or whatever. So I hustled them all inside the house, got them off the porch. It was beautiful weather. Packed them into the house, shut the doors. That was when the spontaneous self-organization happened. This was a little weird. I'd never witnessed. I've had big parties. This party was 50% bigger than last year's party. Last year, maybe 350 people. This one's 600 easy. So I've got maybe, it's 1:30, so I'm down to maybe 175 people, but they're all inside the house. And like, no, the house is kind of on an open plan. There's like a kitchen and a big room and, a bathroom and so forth. Well, normally people just sort of wander from room to room with, their drinks and beer and whatever. This time they're like moving en masse. There's like this outbreak of like herd behavior. And, because it's like packed. I mean, it's packed like it is in here. And people just start moving along the room. There's like these spontaneous kind of like emergent order. They're like actually swirling around the house, and then you don't get to get out of the way. I mean, they're like coming in large groups, and the people in front of them see them coming, and they're moving, and the whole thing just begins jostling in this spontaneous crowd flow, which was hairy, because, if somebody yells fire in a situation like that, there's going to be real injuries. I'd never seen that happen in my house before. So this is my problem, right? I have reached some kind of critical limit in these parties, right? I mean, you keep adding quantity, and eventually there's like a qualitative phase change here. They were nice about it, and finally I got them to leave. I just announced that all the liquor had been drunk, and they left, and there were no casualties, and it was fine. But that's not what concerns me. What concerns me is next year's party, right? Next year's party. Because I don't have any way to define the proportions of this party, nor do I have any security mechanisms in place, nor do the police, which is kind of interesting. So, I'm now going to read to you some of the suggested technical solutions that have been suggested for what is really a microcosm of the organizational problems with the global internet, okay? Because this is my personal incarnation of what's really a much larger problem, a problem that scales up. I mean, what is the problem here? The benefit is that I'm bringing in strangers. It's like reach out and touch someone. But the downside is I'm bringing in strangers, and they can reach out and touch me. The benefit is that I'm breaking the boundaries of my narrow circle of acquaintance. But the downside is I'm breaking the boundaries of my narrow circle of acquaintance. The plus side is this is a really popular party, but the downside is this is a really popular party, right? And I'm now hovering at the edge of a potential dystopian development where I can get, one guy who shows up in order to wreak mischief and can hurt a lot of people in some kind of cascading effect. I don't have any. Well, let's just talk about possible solutions. I think I've defined the problem sufficiently. It's a problem that you ought to recognize, right? So what do? Okay, here's one solution. Go professional. I'm a very popular guy. Why don't I just start a bar? It'll be like, Bruce's Cyberpunk Bar. And, and this is like what you do. And there's like hundreds of these things in Austin. It's like people come in and they like get the beer and they pay you for the beer, right? And you like get an insurance license and you like rent a building and you like hire employees and you establish some kind of formal relationship with the police and you card people when they show up to make sure that it's like legally possible for them to drink. And maybe I could hire bands. It's sort of like the AOL Time Warner version of, what was formerly this kind of freeware, open, loosey-goosey kind of, But, why don't I just do that? I mean, because it's certainly been done. This is the standard way of handling the subject. Well, yeah, okay, but then I'm a bartender. I'm like a guy who owns a club, and I don't really want to own a club because, it's a lot of hassle and most of them go broke. And, I don't mind doing it once a year, but Jesus, every day, 5 times a day, weekends, I got no weekends. I'm like a bar guy suddenly. And I never get to go out in daylight, because I'm like down there managing all these drunks and stuff. I don't think so. That's not really it. So, solution number 2. the party emergency response team. Okay, well, you know, I've got pals who basically show up for these parties. I mean, there's like a hardcore of dudes who really sort of get it about Sterling's parties. And these are sort of the core recruiters. They're kind of the sysadmins of the Sterling scene. Maybe I could deputize these guys, you know? They're like my closest buddies. I mean, maybe they're not at the party, but I'll make an emergency response team for guys who sort of get it about my problem. I'll just like brief them about it, and maybe I'll like give them some kind of semi-uniform style thing, and I'll get like a buddy list of my own, and when it's like getting out of control, it's like, call the PERT, and they like rush in, or maybe they just start phoning people, I don't know. But they're sort of, you know, they don't have the downside of being actual cops. They don't have to like wear a badge or be sort of really accountable in any way. They're just like, you know, a private militia. They're sort of like Blackwater or something, you know, like a private military company. Or, well, basically it's the CERT, except, you know, it's the PERT, and they're there to like sort of react immediately when a party goes out of bounds. Well, I kind of like that idea, actually, because, you know, it kind of suits my organizational style, but the downside is I'd have to join it. And then I'd have to worry about their parties. Do I really want to get up out of bed at 2 a.m., you know, and I could be, like, watching Bollywood movies and, like, pile into my car and drive over to 6th Street and like, how'd you let your friggin' party get out of control? Do I want to go put out the fires at other people's parties? Because I'm not going to be able to just, like, do it by myself, right? I mean, the CERT is a cooperative group. What kind of dues am I going to have to pay to belong to this org? I don't go to that many parties. I mean, I only have one. I don't want to go to parties all the time, especially parties that are no damn good. Okay, well, now I've got a more subtle solution. This is the RAND solution here. The sort of Arquilla and Ronfeld groovy Advent of Net War solution, right? If you've ever read these RAND guys, Advent of Net War, rockin' book. September 12, 2001, I call these guys up. Man, you are futurists of the first water. You were predicting that states would be like attacking non-state actors and that all hell would break loose. You guys are something else. Well, they got a lot of credit for that, Arquilla and Ronfeld. So anyway, what Arquilla and Ronfeld say in their RAND futurist analysis of how you deal with an out-of-control network is, well, you can't have a war on a network because states are hierarchical and networks are distributed, low-key and low. What you need is a counter-network, right? A counter-network, right? Just like Advent of Net War. Okay, so here's my plan. I have plants at the party who are there secretly, and they're sort of organized to one another, and they're not ever made clear to the party members that they're actually there at all. They're covertly there. And they're like covertly organized. They have like secret handshakes and recognition symbols. Now, what is their job? Their job is to monitor the party and see if enthusiasm is moving into an area of untoward radicalism. Right? They don't do anything blatant. What they do is they stage small but effective party-spoiling scenes. Right? And women would be especially good for this, I think, because no one ever thinks they're capable of political organization. So you get like a woman from your counter network to just sort of like burst into tears spontaneously at the party and just sort of start muttering to herself, something along this line. That bastard! I can't believe he would dump me right in the middle of Bruce Sterling's party. Call my mother. And, you know, and then they're like a little cluster sort of goes around and like, you know, they're like patting her and trying to bring her down, and people are like, oh man, this is a bad scene here. What's with the chick over there, man? Or you might have a guy who like gets kind of boisterous at the party. Somebody gets really boisterous at the party and he joins them, but it's like he's feigning that he's on PCP or something. You know, so if like one guy starts misbehaving, this guy's like an agent provocateur. He's just like stumbling, you know, or just, yeah, you know, and just making just taking the edge off the growing enthusiasm, sort of like a carbon rod in a nuclear pile. Well, I'm giving serious attention to that one, actually. Okay, now there's the architectural solution. Maybe it's a technical problem, okay? I can, like, engineer the kegs. Because the kegs are like the locus of the party organization, right? So let's just say maybe my kegs are too low tech. And what I need is like a keg firewall, right? It's like measuring the amount of fluid that's coming out of the kegs. And if the party's getting too boisterous, they just start like busting out air. It's like, hey man, the keg's not working. The keg's not working at Sterling's house, you know, and it's like, oh man, the kegs are dry, you know, and then they leave, and then the kegs just like spring back up. As soon as, you know, and they're just sitting there, they're just kind of like watching network traffic, you know, and if it gets too heavy, then the kegs kick out. Or I could have keg mirror sites at somebody else's party. And it just like pops up on the keg, and it just says, you know, hey, you know, you're like being slash dotted here. Why don't you go over to 4th Street? There's like lots of kegs, and there's like appealing little pictures of the kegs, maybe. And, you know, maybe like webcam photos. Oh, this party's so much fun over here. Why don't you go to that party? Okay, well, you know, that's sort of a techie solution, but then I'd have to wire up the kegs, and the guys that I rented the kegs from might not like my new interface on the keg, and people might accuse me of, like, making darkness the standard, or, you know, the keg tap might not interoperate quite common with other kegs, or you know, the guy might have, like, badly, you know, formulated his kegs. I get suddenly bursts of people from other parties, and I don't really want the guys from their party to use my site as a mirror site. You know, and what if I have to debug the kegs, and, you know, what if flaws are discovered and the patches have patches, and I don't know. Okay, then there's the Transparency International solution, kind of NGO solution, the democratic solution. When I go next year and invite all the people to my party, I could make a clean breast of it. I just say, look, I'd love you to come to my house and have a really nice time, but I have to make it clear to you that we're facing a potential political crisis at my house, and it's time for me to level with you, the party people. And I'm just going to have to appeal to your personal sense of responsibility as citizens to come to my party and not screw it up for everybody else. I want you to watch one another, sort of police one another. I trust you. I don't want to enforce anything on you. I want to devolve the party down to the grassroots level. It's up to you, you. This is your party, not merely my party. You are the community to whom I'm trying to appeal. You need to assemble as a community, hold hands with one another, support one another. If you're too tired to chew, pass it on. Maybe. Maybe. Okay, now there's one other possibility, and we're getting a little hairy now. I mean, this is kind of pushing the limits of parties. But if there's a bad incident at a party, I'm worried about future parties, because I think it may be necessary to have a war on parties. I might put magnetometers into the doors, check people's bags, make them take off their shoes. We'll just get some terror theater installed around the party. We'll have like orange netting and like ID badges which have like your legal name on them rather than the name by which you're known at parties. And I may have to make it clear that as the host, I carry a gun. I am allowed to carry a gun in my own home in Texas. We have, you know, open weapons law. I could just wear a uniform and carry a gun. I don't think they'd get too out of bounds if the host had a gun. If one gun wasn't enough, I could carry 2 guns. That's a possibility. Another possibility, total party awareness. I think it would be possible to install video cams and monitoring equipment throughout the home. I think it would be good to have people sign a disclaimer when they arrive at my party, consenting to be videotaped and to have their remarks at the party recorded. Now, I think this would have a very calming effect on the party. In fact, I'm not sure if that gathering would even be classifiable as a party. But I could probably pack a lot of people into an area like that. Another possibility, legal disclaimers. I'm thinking party shrink wrap. You know, you just don't get a beer unless you, like, break the shrink wrap, and then there's, like, something written on the beer that's, like, really long and kind of inexplicable, but you're required to, like, take some small moral action before you drink the beer. You know, just put your name on it. I don't know. There is a literary solution, sharecropping the party. And I did have some guys show up. This party's great. Why don't you have our corporation sponsor your party, Mr. Sterling? We've got like this really cool building downtown, and there's like lots of empty space. You know, we'd love to like just have you put your name on our corporate party. We said of Bruce Sterling, CTMR. Presents, you know, Intel's Blast 2005, you know, and I'd just be I'd be renting out my celebrity, you know, I'd be just like the billboard for somebody else's organization, and they'd pick up all the tab, and presumably they'd hire thugs and, you know, give people free shit, and, you know, you get mouse pads or whatever. I mean, the upside is that they'd handle all the hassle for me, and they'd probably put on like a better feed than me. But the downside is that all my friends would accuse me of becoming a corporate sellout. You know, I would basically be sheltering under their, you know, profit-driven organization. And, you know, who knows? And then the last solution, which I think is probably an underestimated possibility. I could ask a charity for help. I could make my party a fundraising event for somebody who's sort of like morally unimpeachable. Red Cross, you know, Greenpeace. You know, I could kind of have my choice because there's like lists of charities, like right-wing charities, left-wing charities, hip charities, dodgy charities, you know, sobbing into your handkerchief, March of Dimes, small crippled kid charities, you know, children dying of obscure illnesses, you know, anti-AIDS, whatever demographic you want to hit. There's some kind of NGO, and you ask for money, and, you know, and it's like a community leader thing. It's like, well, I have this resource among my friends, and it's time for us to go out and, you know, see to it that, you know, this particular intractable social problem is somehow we're feigning to deal with it. I don't know. But I'm sure that would, like, mellow the scene out considerably because, A, most people just want the free beer. They don't actually want to, like, get hit up for $10 like some, you know, nitwit with a clipboard or, you know. And also it lends it a kind of moral gravity. It's like, oh, look how mature the party host is here. He's really, you know, he's like angling for a, you know, seat on the city council. He's like moving from party animal to community leader. And, you know, he's going to like build us a music museum or some godforsaken thing. Well, it works. You know, and those are all that I've managed to think of. But I'm sure that's not the entire gamut of possible methods by which I could deal with this. And, you know, my situation is quite serious. I mean, it really is a conundrum. You know, it's a security problem. It's a societal problem. It's a social, cultural, literary problem. It's a personal problem of my own. My own credibility is at stake here. And although I have written a book about computer security, which, you know, goes into agonizing detail about the intractability of some of these difficulties, I can't solve the problem within my own damn home. Right? I have no solution. I have no solution. And who's got it? Who has damn got it? If you can tell me, I will publicize it. If you will think about it, I will be happy. If you will send me email, I will take you with utter seriousness. It's a funny problem, but it's a real problem. So, thanks for your attention. If we have time, I think we could take some questions in. Okay? A question.
Actually, it's a comment.
And it's in 3 parts.
We thought you would stay an extra day so you could come visit us, but I hear you're here to see the library.
Yeah.
That's the real reason you're staying an extra day.
Yeah, that's right.
We can't compare to the library.
I'm sorry, but Rem Koolhaas is a much cooler guy than I have done work for Rem Koolhaas. I am in Rem's new book. He's got a book out called Oma, and I have an essay in Rem's book. So, I have never met Rem Koolhaas, although I have, lectured his students in Rotterdam, and, he asked me to go to the library. So he's giving a personal tour, and it's like, Bruce, will you go? And the answer is, fucking yay, yeah, I'm going. I'm going, and I'll blog it if they don't confiscate my camera. I'm actually in Seattle with some regularity. If there's some particular reason that you need me here, what the hey, I got a lot of pals here. And, it's good that this is the last day of my tour, because I'm toast. And, but I have, a support group of people who have been to my parties in Austin. I have a support group of people here who will look after me and see to it that I don't crash and burn. And, they actually will feed me. I mean, this is one of the great cultural centers of science fiction writing. It really is. There's a lot of brain power in this town, a lot of creative talent. But, I'm not here by accident. I'm sure I'll be back again later. Yes, sir?
Is Andy Kaufman really alive?
Well, that's a pretty neat social hack, I thought. I can't believe he's alive. I'm not even sure Bin Laden's alive. There are days when I wonder if Cheney is alive. Another question? Yeah?
What's the last 2 movies you saw and the last 2 CDs you bought?
Well, I'm a big Bollywood fan, actually. So, it's the last Bollywood movie I saw. Mainhunna, yes, the new Shah Rukh Khan vehicle. It's directed by Farah Khan. She's like this quite famous Bollywood choreographer, and she's in the stable of this guy named Karan Johar. Who's like one of the new Bollywood kids. His dad was a film director. They're very into the feudal family scene in Bollywood. I don't like cinema. In fact, I hate movies. I never wrote a screenplay. I can't stand Hollywood people. But I like Bollywood a lot because it's a really nice and sort of easily available social register that takes the moral temperature of Indian society while it's undergoing a really sort of unprecedented transformation. And I think Karan Johar and his circle of people really get it about what's happening to their demographic. And they're coming up with a kind of cinema that sort of reflexively appeals to every kind of knee-jerk, feudalist, BJP, Hindutva kind of reactionary, foot-touching, sentimentalist strain in Indian society, while at the same time it's brilliantly produced, hip, great music, international sets, to see, say, Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gham, which is like sitting in my laptop right now, and to see these scenes where ultra-wealthy, swanky Indians are just cutting a swath through London, right? Through London. I mean, these guys are walking through London the way Yankee tourists walk through Chandni Chowk in Delhi. It's just like an amazing social statement. And these guys are just really talented. I mean, Karan Johar is totally on top of his game. And it's not the sort of thing that you watch if you like good cinema by Western standards, but in terms of an artist who's like speaking effectively to his society in terms that he can understand and sort of like coaxing them into a new sensibility. This guy is just aces. Man, my hat is off to him. And even his choreographer, who just did this film, heGÇÖll, has instantly become the most important female film director in Bollywood. The closing credits alone for that film are worth the price of the movie. Now, I could go on all day about it. I have. There's a character in this book whose girlfriend is a Bollywood actress, and it's just a fascinating scene. I used to live in India, so I have a patriotic feeling about about Bharat. It fills my heart with cheer to see them doing so well. I mean, I was there in the 1970s when you had, Western political analysts who were just looking down their nose at India and just like predicting they'd crater any moment. It's like lifeboat ethics, they're going to fall off the edge of the universe. And the best we could do for India is to just sort of like reduce the bleeding wound, I mean, India is not Oz, but Jesus, compare that country to any country around it. Sri Lanka is a basket case. Burma is a wreck. Pakistan is a black hole. They're doing great. They're doing great. I'm proud of them. Another question? Yeah.
Let's find out qualifiers. Are you planning on writing a Freudian book?
Yeah, I just got commissioned to do like an MIT press book on design. It's like this little like part of a series thing. It's kind of a pamphlet. But yeah, and it's like that's a sort of a Viridian book. Viridian Design is my website and mailing list where I talk about environmentalism and post-industrial issues. It's like how do you sort of innovate your way out of an ecological crisis. There probably aren't any ways, but, you ought to go down fighting, in my opinion. And, it gets me a lot of good gigs. I really like running mailing lists. Doing my weblog is the most exciting thing I do right now. It's really gratifying. There's not a lot of money in it, but, it's kind of the task of my generation in literature to try to tame the net to literary ends. And, this is something I've been involved in ever since I discovered word processing. I'm like the last generation to work on manual typewriters. I wrote 2 books on manual typewriters because there was no other option. And I'm truly a hardened veteran of the digital revolution. And I will go out there and die right on the barbed wire. So doing a design list is very useful. It's hard to keep up with the world of design because it's so trendy. I mean, there are good design magazines. There's ID, there's Metropolis, there's, Domus. I write for all these mags, but there's a lot going on under the surface that isn't seen production, or students are working on it, or it's theoretical, or it's in a museum situation. And it's very useful to me to have this mailing list, which is sort of like a private intelligence network of people just telling me about cool stuff. And the benefit to me is, I get a bunch of stuff that never shows up on the list. I'm like the sink trap, I'm full of hair. And, a lot of water flows through, and that's very useful. So I'll probably continue to do that for a while. And, yeah, I'm actually going to, sign a contract and do a book. Why not? Got plenty of material. To write a book like that in my sleep. I may. Another question?
Do you really think it's possible to tame the net for literary purposes?
Well, it's not even possible to tame the printing press for literary purposes. But there are certainly things you can do that affect the nature of literary culture. Yeah, I think, you can't really tame anything. I mean, you can't tame free expression sort of by its nature. But, yeah, I think writers can do very well for themselves on the net. I've seen people do it. I think, if there's a guy who's right on top of the situation right now, it would be Cory Doctorow, who I understand is going to be here in short order. This is a guy who's really made a literary reputation for himself as a net activist first and foremost. He's not like a print guy like myself who kind of dabbles with laptops. And this is a guy for whom dots on a screen are his primary mode of literary expression, and every once in a while something hits a hard copy. Because he's much younger than me. But he's got a lot to say, our Corey, you know. I pay a lot of attention to him. I consider him quite a significant figure. I don't think he's going to tame anything, but I think he's a harbinger of a new way of life for creative writers. Somebody else? One more? We're going to have to sign some product here, I guess. One more question? Yeah?
Could you speak a few words about Isaac Asimov?
Oh, he's dead.
A few more words?
You know, I met him once. I met him at like a Nebula Awards thing. I never really ran an Isaac circle, but we had a very cordial conversation. This is like the height of cyberpunk. I was there with like spiked hair and a FNSF T-shirt with the sleeves ripped out, and there was Isaac with, you know, like a three-piece suit and this mutton chop whisker thing, and he'd just written this blazing editorial excoriating Reagan's Star Wars as a complete piece of scientific baloney. And I said, boy, I was proud to have a story in the issue where you wrote that editorial revealing that this Star Wars thing is a complete piece of trumped-up crap. And he said, well, you know, yes, exactly. Oh, that's fine, young man, good of you, and so forth and so on. And then he said that he'd gotten a lot of hate mail about it, which I just found contemptible, you know. But he set me a good example by taking that kind of public stand, I thought. He was showing some integrity there. And, you know, there's nothing I can do now about him and his situation, but on the other hand, I can attempt to pay that debt forward. And now I write political stuff. I mean, I'm a Wired editorial columnist. I wrote a long article on space war. I mean, this notion's never gone away. There's Star Wars all over this book. You know, the iron triangle of the imagination that rules military decisions in Washington is, if anything, 100 times stronger now than it was in Reagan's day. I have to speak out about it. I do. So, thanks for your attention.